that happened yesterday and has been happening lately, increased violence. And I can't highlight everything. There was horrible footage of a gentleman being stabbed for asking a guy to stop smoking drugs. He got stabbed in Vancouver and he was killed. It's a father and a husband. And I'm blown away. The guy sitting there eating or drinking coffee. I don't know how he could have intervened. Like, people say, oh, he just sat there, but I don't know, like shell-shocked maybe. And in Toronto, there was a 16-year-old kid stabbed and killed. Needless violence. We are experiencing in real time the impact of Trudeau's lackadaisical justice policy, lackadaisical legal policy, out on bail, violent criminals flooding our streets and attacking innocent people from behind and killing them. And people are tolerating this. It's incredible and it's sick. I've got a link for one piece of violence, but I just wanted to show you this. Matt Strauss is responding to teenage victim in unprovoked stabbing at Kiel Station, identified man charged. He says, I don't want to alarm anyone, but it seems like our society is actually falling apart. It is WEF policies flooding our society with people who don't respect or align with our values, and liberal policy of letting violent criminals out on bail on usually the same day after they commit violent crimes that are exacerbating this. Also, the drug response, allowing people to have as many drugs as they want, and the government's paying for safe drugs. It's insane. These policies are leading to the increased violence, along with the transgender push and the push for mental health destigmatization or whatever. Everybody's suffering from a mental health crisis, but if you suggest to somebody that they might be suffering from a mental health crisis, that person will manufacture the mental health crisis. If you suggest to people they might be sick, that's abusive. It's called Munchausen's by proxy. If a mother or a father or parents do that to a child, they do that because they like the attention they get from the hospital and from other people. And the child is being abused to meet the needs of the parents. We are being abused by the government, being told, oh, you might be sick. If you do that to a child, you don't get to continue to look after that child usually, right? There's usually some kind of intervention. But now the government is doing that to people and saying you might be sick. And we think you might be sick. And you have to test using this flawed test that we know is flawed. And if you do test positive, then you have to stay home. We have been abused by our government. And now we're shit shocked that people are more violent and are falling apart. I agree with Mr. Strauss or Dr. Strauss's assessment here. We can fix this, but it'll take removing the communists who have taken over our government, honestly. Here's Anti-Grifter, and he says, countries by quality of life, Canada in 2021, number one, right? Yeah, Canada in 2023, 25. Whew. Do you remember when everybody was sharing that? Everybody being Mark Gerritsen and the liberal cronies, sharing Canada's number one. Oh, I don't see bad policies here, blah, 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 blah. Now what does it look like? Morons. Here is a Bloc Québécois MP, and I think this is sped up, but I don't know. Rob's doing kind of the same thing. Well, I don't know if he's doing the same thing I do, but he watches Canadian politics as well, so it's nice to follow him because he's got lots of good little clips. And he says, Bloc Québécois MP Alan Theron says, no, this government has not been able to sweep Chinese interference under the rug. They're trying to. They're doing it right now with Elizabeth May. I'll show you that after I show you this. He says, Theron says, 72% of Canadians are in favor of an independent inquiry. Even Han Dong himself is. Imagine what else these politicians are trying to hide. They are trying to hide a lot. It sounds like it's sped up, but I don't have any anything enabled on this clip. Like, as far as I understand, this clip is at regular speed, but it sounds sped up to me. So apologies if you're listening at double speed and this sounds like a chipmunk. Here we go.
Honorable member for La Prairie. Let's talk about Chinese interference, Mr. Speaker. No, this government hasn't been able to sweep it under the rug. On Thursday, the House voted in favor of a public independent inquiry on Chinese interference. The Bloc Québécois, the NDP, the Conservatives are all in favor, and 72% of Canadians are for it. Even the member for Don Valley North is for it. Even the Liberal, who is facing the most serious allegations, is asking for an inquiry to cast light on this. When will the Prime Minister understand that the only defensible option is a public inquiry? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, I take this very seriously. It is a non-partisan issue, or an issue that should never be partisan. That is why we have appointed an unimpeachable, non-partisan expert, the former Governor General, David Johnston, who will review this matter and decide whether to call for an inquiry or another type of investigation, and we will certainly implement his recommendations. 2 national security organizations will investigate the matter, and they will get to the bottom of it. The Honourable Member for La Prairie. Mr. Speaker, I was forgetting that the Prime Minister is not the only one who doesn't want an inquiry. There's also his good friend, the Liberal Jean Chrétien, who also doesn't care about interference. Unless, and I'm quoting him, the ambassador or consul of China is running around with envelopes with cash in them. So according to Jean Chrétien, if there aren't any envelopes full of cash, apparently there's no reason to investigate what's happening to our democracy. Is that really the liberal ethical standard, Mr. Speaker? Does the Prime Minister like to see that his only ally against an independent inquiry is the father of the sponsorship scandal? The Right Honourable.
And so, as you heard from Trudeau himself, he said, no, we're going to get the special rapporteur to look at this, and then we'll follow his instructions. And the special rapporteur is the Governor General at the same time as a conversation was captured between the People's Republic of China and a Chinese billionaire about funneling money to the Trudeau Foundation. And Governor General Johnston himself was already in place and potentially targeted by this scheme. So no, he's not unimpeachable. He is involved, and he can't investigate himself in a reliable way. That's laughable. That's ridiculous. Goodness me. Greg Wycliffe says Elizabeth May is outraged that CSIS leaked info suggesting our democratic elections might be compromised. The fact that our democratic elections might be compromised apparently is not of note to her. It's very interesting. Here's Elizabeth May losing her mind on the House of Commons floor. This is not legitimate. This is a distraction, trying to turn the page on this. That's what they're trying to do.
Speaker, something pretty shocking happened to this place last week. I refer to the statement made by the honourable member for Don Valley North. I'm pretty scandalized that anonymous smears from CSIS end up destroying reputations with no real opportunity to respond. It's not like CSIS ever gets anything wrong. Just ask Maher Arar. What the heck is going on here? And will an inquiry find out who in CSIS thinks it's okay to leak to the media? It's wrong.
So she wants an inquiry to find out who in CSIS is leaking to the media because it's wrong. So that's the inquiry we're going to get. They're going to just try and say, oh, you want an inquiry? Okay, we'll give you an inquiry. We'll find that leaker, or we'll find a scapegoat to make an example out of, right? Dale Smith says Elizabeth May denounces the CSIS leaks to the media. Liberals and NDP applaud, but the Conservatives did not. So Dale Smith is trying to, brand the Conservatives as pro-leaker. Really, I think you're missing the actual issue here, which is Chinese interference as illustrated by the leaker from CSIS. And Elizabeth May talking about how CSIS never gets anything wrong. Nobody's saying, let's take the CSIS leakers' words at face value and respond as if everything they say is 100% true. People want an investigation, which is strange. I want the government to be dropped. I think we've seen enough to drop this government because it seems to me in their behavior not working for Canadians or their constituents. So with the context of that and the CSIS leaker, I think we have enough to drop this government. But Elizabeth May only wants an inquiry, and everybody doesn't want an inquiry at all. She wants to inquire about the CSIS leaker, but everybody else only wants an inquiry. But fine, let's inquire. But they don't even want that. The government doesn't want that. They don't want any scrutiny at all. They don't want anybody looking at this at all. Han Dong has released a statement, and he's suing Global News fundamentally. And somebody says this isn't my thought process here, but this is a kind of a recurring theme in the comments. The Liberals could release the transcript of the call anytime. So could CSIS, right? Liberals are in charge of government. I mean, CSIS leaker, I guess, could do it. But the Liberals could release the transcript of the call. One exists, right? CSIS says one exists. Release the transcript. Why aren't they releasing the transcript? If Han Dong is innocent, why did he leave the cabinet? Why did Trudeau accept, or why did he leave the caucus? Why did Trudeau accept his resignation from the caucus? There's so many questions that don't align with this positioning of this. And all people want is an inquiry. They don't even want to drop the government. I want to drop the government. But they don't want to drop the government. They want an inquiry, and they're not even going to get that, it seems. Here's Han Dong. He says, March 27th, that was yesterday. Today is March 28th. He says, yes, I'm taking legal action against Global News and Chorus Entertainment. I've retained a lawyer to begin legal action to its fullest extent. My father arrived in Canada in 1989, 2 months after Tiananmen Square. In 1970, my father was sent to the May 7th cadre school, re-education camp, during the Cultural Revolution and subject to forced labor and 24-hour surveillance for almost an entire year. From that experience, my father knew that there was no future left for him in China. As a result, in 1990, my father brought me, my sister, and my mother to Canada to begin a new life. The trauma left on my father is one of the compelling reasons why, as a co-chair of the Canadian-China Legislative Association and a member of Parliament, I took every available opportunity to advocate on behalf of Michael Korvig and Michael Spavor and to call for their immediate release. It is inconceivable that I would ever suggest a falsely accused individual should spend an extra minute in jail. Canada has given my family the opportunity to succeed. Despite the abuse and shame my family has suffered over the last few weeks, I truly believe that my parents made the right decision to come to Canada. I voted in support of public inquiry on foreign interference to demonstrate to my family, my colleagues, and constituents that I have nothing to hide, and to remind my false accusers and global news that the truth will always come out in the end. I support the mandate of the independent special rapporteur, the Right Honourable David Johnston, and I'm willing to meet with him and provide any information that he requests. As I stated in my speech to my family in the House of Commons, the truth will protect us, our honor and our family will get through this together. I can look at myself in the mirror and know with full certainty that I have the truth on my side. My anonymous false accusers and their enablers cannot say the same. So, David Jacobs says, Trudeau and CSIS must release the transcripts. It is grossly unfair to Han Dong not to do so. We have a serious problem with election interference. It needs to be addressed, but not at any and all costs. Let's clear this issue up immediately. They're not going to clear this issue up immediately. Tim says once he gets his lawsuit started, he can bring application to get the transcript. Then he can get a waiver of the implied obligation of confidentiality and share it. Looking forward. So it'll be interesting to see what happens and who is telling the truth and who is not. Here is George. He says, guilty until proven innocent is the essence of McCarthyism. Shame on all of us for abetting this charade, or this character assassination. Funny thing, here's Ryan, and he says, millions of unvaccinated Canadians were deemed guilty of spreading infection and killing people with zero evidence by your very government. Excuse me while I don't share your same sentiment. Yeah, I think that they're overlooking people, just like the NHL Pride Nights. They say all are welcome here, right? Unless you're unvaccinated, right? We're inclusive of everyone, unless you're a specific skin color that we're not highlighting tonight, in which case, could you step off to the side, please? That's not racist, but when apparently white people did that, it was racist, and that's why this is okay. What? It doesn't make any sense. It's ridiculous. We'll talk about racism in a minute. Terry says, it's bad, this bad, and National Post is reporting conservatives have softened China's stance since riding losses in 2021. And this person says, Zong, photographed sitting next to Polyev at one of the events, is Ontario co-chair of the National Congress of Chinese Canadians, NCCC, a group that for years has echoed Beijing's talking points on a range of contentious issues, from China's desires to annex Taiwan to opposing Hong Kong's pro-democracy movement and promoting China's Confucius Institutes. He was once a delegate to the Chinese People's Political Consultative Conference and appears in a video of NCCC members last year singing in the celebration of the People's Republic's 73rd anniversary, concluding with the words, "Long live the motherland, China." And this person tags Andy Lee. Andy Lee, are you seeing this? Canada is being bullied by the CCP inside our own country. These groups are propaganda machines for Beijing. And if we, the taxpayer, are paying these CCP agents to bully, harass, and take over Canada, well, we're the stupidest people on the planet, second to none. Doh. It seems like that's exactly what we're doing. It seems like we're funding these things. And it seems like we've got a huge China problem in our government. And fixing that problem will be difficult. Very, very difficult, I think. Here is a gentleman talking about Ukraine. We're a little international before we focus in on Canada today. Yves Engler says, today I challenged Justin Trudeau on his role in ramping up the NATO proxy war with Russia. I questioned him on Canada sending over $2 billion in arms to Ukraine last year as Canada opposes China's call for a truce and calls for regime change in Moscow. So this is interesting and kind of connected to the Chinese situation, et cetera, that's going on. All of the the international politics, the worldwide geopolitical movements, including BRICS Plus, and we're going to talk about that in a minute because that's huge and worthy of its own focus, really. But with China and China soft power infiltrating our government and probably the United States too, and other governments maybe in the West. They are more brazen, more bold. And so I don't know how much of the destruction is being wrought through bad policy, through Justin Trudeau's WEF connections or Justin Trudeau's China connections, or is it just Justin Trudeau being incompetent and that's maybe the people who put him in place, but that's what they were hoping for. He'd be incompetent and unable to manage finance and maybe put a Rhodes Scholar reporter in charge of the finances and watch Canada suffer while they, I don't know, supply the world with LNG. I don't know, benefit at our expense, right? Or other people that they control benefit at our expense. But that's generally what I'm seeing. And that's very frustrating. So we are funding these things and we are funding foreign wars, NATO proxy wars between Ukraine and Russia, proxy war to the United States, right? And we get nothing for it. We're poor for it and it doesn't help us. It doesn't help us militarily. It doesn't help keep us safe. It doesn't help us with food. It doesn't help anything. It doesn't do anything for us. So here's this guy pushing back on one aspect of all of this. So good for him. It's 30 seconds. Also, this is a good example of what happens if you go out to a political event and you are protesting or you're saying that you disagree with the current thing that's happening. You will have intimidating people come close to you and tell you that you can't be there and you have to move and you can't stand there and you can't say that here and so on and so forth. Really. So here's an example of what will happen to you if you go and protest anywhere in Canada right now. Here we go.
Mr. Trudeau, why do you keep ramping up the proxy war? Why do you keep ramping up the proxy war with Russia, Mr. Trudeau? Mr. Trudeau, you said more than $2 billion in weapons to fight the NATO proxy war. Mr. Trudeau, end the NATO proxy war. Mr. Trudeau, end the NATO proxy war. You don't have right to touch me. Back up. End the NATO proxy war.
Right? So they're guiding him back up. You can't stand there. You have to move over here, do this, do that, blah, 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 blah. So, yeah. Do you agree with sending Canadian tax dollars to fight NATO proxy wars? Do you agree with engaging or not getting to have any questions, no investigation, no dropping the government? No, let's not even talk about China anymore. Let's turn the page. Let's talk about the budget. That's what they want to do. That is what they're hoping by the end of this week. And if there isn't another bombshell, they might get their wish. They might. And that's frustrating, man. That's frustrating. Maxime Bernier, we have to talk about BRICS Plus. BRICS Plus is an economic arm of the war against the United States. The war against the United States, if that financial, staple, if the United States loses the reserve currency status, that'll be interesting, to say the least. That won't be good. Nobody will be happy about that. Here's Fox News talking about this. We're going to listen to a minute and a half. She talks about how this is the perfect storm. And then this guy says the perfect storm too. They both do. It's such a strange thing. So I don't know who's feeding them these talking points, but they're both certainly being fed talking points. This lends credibility to the idea that this is a forced crash to migrate people to central bank digital currencies. That's the prediction. Okay, here we go.
States and the fact that oil has always been traded in dollars. If that were to end, that would mean the end of the U.S. dollar. Look, there is a perfect storm happening right now, Will. The world's reserve currency being that, having that status has been a real privilege, but we've abused the privilege by wholly reckless monetary and fiscal policies over many years, certainly over the last couple of years, which has really devalued the dollar. On top of that, now you do have this perfect storm of Biden's weakness, his war on American domestic energy production, the Ukraine war, and as you point out, because of all of these things, we've got America's enemies led by China forming a new economic bloc. And all it would take at this point now, because we're at this pivotal moment, Will, is for Saudi Arabia, who has indicated that they're open to this, to say, you know what, we're going to be open to considering other currencies to trade in oil. If that were to happen, there would be a complete implosion of the global economic system, but certainly the American economic system. And if that were to happen, you'd be looking at sky-high inflation, just raging Weimar Republic kind of inflation. If you think inflation is bad now, just wait. But more importantly, we would lose our economic dominance and we would lose our superpower status.
Okay, so just very quick, I want to, and I'll play the next guy's clip in a second, but I want to make something clear. Having a dominating economic status means that the United States can lend $100 million to an African country, and they lend that money in US dollars, okay? And then they say to the African country, you can pay us back in these terms. And the African country says, great, that sounds wonderful, but you have to pay us back in US dollars. How does the African country make US dollars? The African country does not print US dollars. It can't make US dollars by itself. It has to export. Exporting products that the United States wants. So the United States bought the ability to purchase wholesale a country's production in order to satisfy their needs. So the United States has cheap products year-round because they do things like that. They buy a country, and the country is then de facto beholden to the United States in order to buy US dollars. And they need US dollars to buy oil. So it works for everybody, but it gives the United States a lot of leverage, a lot of dominance. If the United States loses that dominance and the African countries can buy oil from Russia in something else, then they could become, and the United States exports wheat to the African country in order to make up the rest of their food stocks. I don't know, there was a guy on Twitter that I showed the other day who explained that in order to keep power, you make each country not able to grow its own food, but it has to import food. So it's interdependent. And so you have more control, right? It's more central control because you can say, well, if you don't do X, then we'll stop exporting grain to you and then you'll starve. So your countrymen won't like that. And it takes time to change crops. So that's an important aspect of why losing the reserve currency might impact the United States and potentially Canada in a way that would be, that you don't necessarily see now. Right? Okay. Here's the second clip, Perfect Storm. Okay, listen for Perfect Storm. It'll be about a minute and a half. Here we go.
Here's my take. The most interesting outcome of the 3-day summit between Vladimir Putin and Xi Jinping got limited media attention. Describing their talks, Putin said, "We are in favor of using the Chinese yuan for settlements between Russia and the countries of Asia, Africa, and Latin America." So, the world's second largest economy and its largest energy exporter are together actively trying to dent the dollar's dominance as the anchor of the international financial system. Will they succeed? The dollar is America's last surviving superpower. It gives Washington unrivaled economic and political muscle. It can slap sanctions on countries unilaterally, which frees that country out of large parts of the world economy. And Washington can spend freely, certain that its debt will be bought up by the rest of the world. The war against Ukraine, combined with Washington's increasingly confrontational approach to China, have created a perfect storm in which both Russia and China are accelerating efforts to diversify away from the dollar. Their central banks are keeping less of their reserves in dollars, and most trade between them is being settled in the yuan. They are also making efforts to get other countries to follow suit. The Biden administration has handled the economic war against Russia extremely effectively by building a coalition of almost all the world's advanced economies.
See, at that point, I don't believe a word he said. The Biden administration's done something right? Psh, nope, I don't think so. I was just interested in the perfect storm part, right? Did they read the same prep documents? Maybe. Oh, it's the perfect storm, perfect storm, perfect storm. Anita Anand says, earlier today, let's talk about the military. So what's the impact of Biden and, his mismanagement and the BRICS system becoming prominent, standing up during this time? Probably the most palpable threat to U.S. dominance in our lifetime. I don't think that's overstating it. And if they lose their reserve status, I think the United States has gone to war for less. Like Iraq started saying they might start selling oil in yuan, and that ended pretty quick. Right? Suddenly there were weapons of mass destruction or whatever. I'm not 100% sure if that was a preamble to the to the Iraq war. I think, anyway, but I think the Pentagon being found out on the September 10th had something to do with it as well, but who knows? But historically, the United States has gone to war to protect that power, to protect that kind of status. And it would be insane if they didn't respond at all. And it doesn't look like they're responding at all at this point in time, but we'll see. We'll see what happens. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm misreading it. Maybe there's a whole bunch of back channel things, and maybe Biden's getting things just spot on. But I'm very skeptical. Today is today, so let's move into that. Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland makes traditional new shoes purchase in advance of today's federal budget. A pair of simple heels from Simon's on sale at $112. Okay, there you go. So the budget is being prepared for, and here is one of the tax, this guy's the CTF, the Canadian Tax Federation, and I believe. And he says, stop the tax hikes, stop the MP pay raise. So this is about a minute. Here we go.
I'm Franco Terrazzano. I'm the Federal Director of the Canadian Taxpayers Federation. And we have a message for Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland ahead of tomorrow's budget. Stop the tax hikes and stop the Member of Parliament pay raise. On April 1, MPs will take more money out of Canadians' pockets and stuff more money into their own. The carbon tax is going up. Alcohol taxes are going up, and MP pay is also going up. MPs will take their fourth pay raise since the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic on April 1. We estimate this year's pay raise will range from an extra $5,100 for backbench MPs all the way to an extra $10,200 for Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. But Canadians overwhelmingly oppose the MP pay raise. 4 out of 5 Canadians oppose the MP pay raise, according to Leger poll results commissioned by the CTF that we're releasing today. Stopping a pay raise isn't rocket science, especially when Canadians overwhelmingly oppose it.
So they should listen to us, but they're not going to. They are not going to. Here's a minute of Poilievre doing the same thing in the House of Commons. Will he show a bit of restraint and commit in tomorrow's budget to no new taxes? I'll just show you the first question and not the answer, because the Liberals don't answer questions they don't like.
What we voted against is the Prime Minister's war on work, with higher and higher taxes and clawbacks that punish people for working hard. In fact, a worker can lose as much as 88 cents on the next dollar he or she earns. There's no common sense in that, Mr. Speaker. Why would people work more to just give it over to this Prime Minister? Will the Prime Minister reverse his anti-work taxes, give Canadians a break so that hard work pays off and Canadians can bring home powerful paychecks?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
I have no interest in hearing what he has to say. Here's Mr. Stash. He says, there's been a leak, a teaser of Freeland's budget today. There will be a new grocery benefit paid quarterly along with the GST rebate. 11 million of Canada's lowest income earners qualify. This is wealth redistribution, and it's not appropriate. Just lower the taxes. That will help more. And, well, here's the food professor, and he says exactly that. Tax reductions, said the food professor, would be more beneficial for everyone. Also, it may be time for Canada to think about its own SNAP food benefits program for Canadians like they have in the US. It's the old food stamp program. And food professor again says the federal budget reports suggest junk fees paid by companies which increase food prices could be eliminated. Grocery rebates for lower income Canadians are also on the way. Why not eliminate all taxes on food if not served or processed on site? Yeah, there's all sorts of policy disasters that we're suffering through. Here's another one. Do you want to eat bugs? Innovation Guelph says this week's International Women's Month spotlight is on Natalie, the CEO of Bugs on Mars. Natalie is leading the charge towards creating alternative proteins through smarter farming. Sorry, you don't want to eat bugs, and you're not designed to eat bugs. So unless you're eating fried worms for a dare and you're doing it ironically, don't eat bugs. It's not a good idea. How to Eat Fried Worms was a book that was popular in the 80s. Okay. Wall Street Silver says, Italy says to Klaus Schwab, we will not eat the bugs. And Italy bans insect flour from its pasta despite Echo Buzz. The Echo Buzz? I mean, I see what you did there with the wings and the buzz and the insects, but no, I'm not eating insects. Hello, everyone. Thanks for watching. You can check out full episodes of Canada Poly every day at CanadaPoly.com. You can also go to CanadaPoly.com and pick up a ticket for a live event. The live event is taking place in Streetsville, and the location will be provided to ticket holders. But you can check out a live event. Dr. Patrick Phillips, Sarah C., and Scarlett Martin. I'm sorry, Sarah. I don't know I can't say your last name, and I'm terrible at saying last names. We'll be joining Greg Wycliffe and myself for an uncensored round table. It would be lovely if you could join us. Tickets at CanadaPoly.com. And if you live in Toronto, Mississauga, Milton, GTA, Hamilton, Guelph, Kitchener, Cambridge, it's probably well worth the drive to Streetsville. Thanks for watching, everybody, and have a wonderful, wonderful day.